Page 128. Hachama merosh ha'ilanot nistaka bovanetze likrat Shabbat ha'malka bovanetze likrat Shabbat ha'malka Hachama merosh ha'ilanot nistaka bovanetze likrat Shabbat ha'malka bovanetze likrat Shabbat ha'malka Hinehi yoredet hakdosha Hinehi yoredet habrucha Hachama merosh ha'ilanot nistalka bovanetze likrat Shabbat ha'malka bovanetze likrat Shabbat ha'malka Hinehi yoredet hakdosha Hinehi yoredet habarucha Chama merosh ha'ilanot nistalka bovanetze likrat Shabbat ha'malka bovanetze likrat Shabbat ha'malka
Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos to everyone. Welcome back to CBS after this beautiful week. A few of you I think I have not met yet, so if this is your first time at CBS or if you've only been here a couple of times, special welcome to you. We have a special evening tonight. We're going to do sort of an abridged Shabbat service, and then we have a special guest speaker, as most of you probably know, Tam Edelman. I'm going to be doing a little intro a little bit later, but I'm very much looking forward to hearing about her Tikkun Olam work, her work focused on repairing this very broken world. So we're going to begin by lighting our Shabbat candles, and I'd like to invite Donna Mendelson and Rachel Friedman to come up to the bima, and you can follow along on page 120.
Changed. Oops. Good. Oops. Come on, I get another one. You can do it that way? Go ahead.
No, okay, I'm just going to give you the wick. No, that's okay. No, put it, no. Just do it this way. Okay.
I'm a disaster
No, we each have our own customs. It's beautiful.
Okay,
However you want to do it.
let's do it this way.
You can just touch it to that. Perfect.
Okay,
Okay, good.
there we go.
Yeah. Okay. 120, page 120.
Okay.
Baruch atah
Adonai,
Adonai,
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
melech
melech olam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav, tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the lights of Shabbat.
Very nice. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Please turn to page 128. We're going to do a song that we haven't done in a little while. It's one of the initial Friday night Kabbalat Shabbat prayers. This one is called Yedid Nefesh, which essentially means partner of my soul. It's a way of referring to God, not the God who sits high on a throne, who judges us, who we ask forgiveness from, who we address and request to be written in the book of life, the God that we talk about in the liturgy of the High Holy Days. This God on Shabbat is a very different God, much more personal, much more imminent, much closer and intimate to us. Page 128.
Yedid nefesh av Rachaman, Yedid nefesh av Rachaman, Meshochav decha el ritzonecha, Meshochav decha yalai lai 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 el ritzonecha.
Our call to worship, the Baruch Hu, is on page 146. If you are able, please rise.
This will be a melody probably less familiar to most of you, but it still starts off with yalalai, so that's easy. Yai-lai-la-lai, yai-lai-la-lai, yai-lai-lai-lai-lai-lai-lai. Yai lai lai lai, yai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai, yai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai, yai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai. Baruch Hu et Adonai. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Va'ed. Yai lai lai lai, yai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai lai, yai
Please join me at the top of page 149. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. Page 151. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha uv'chol nafshecha uv'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavacha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam B'shivtecha b'veitecha, uv'lektecha v'derech, uv'shokpecha uv'kumecha, ukshartam la'od al yadecha, v'hayu latotafot bein einecha, uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha, uv'isharecha. Leman tiskaru, v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, Vitem kedoshim lelohechem, ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liod lachem lelohim, ani Adonai Elohechem.
Page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. Mi Chamocha is on page 158.
Yam bam bam bim bim bye ba bye ba bim bam. Yam bam bam bim bim bye ba bye ba bim bam. Ya la 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 ya ba bye ba bim bam. Ya la 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 ya ba bye ba bim bam. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot Sefele, no ratahilot, o sefele, mahala chutacha, rauvanecha, okei ayam lifnei Moshe uMiriam, ze'eli anu ve'amru, Adonai lo leolam va'ed, yam bam bam bim bim bye, ba bye ba bim bam. Yum bum bum bim bim bye, ya bye 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 bim bum. Ya la 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 la, ya bye 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 bim bum. Ya la 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 la, ya bye 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 bim bum.
Page 161. You know, this song that Gordon just led us in, Micha Mocha, is a song about crossing thresholds. The Jewish people, our ancestors, were in the land of Egypt in bondage. They were able, with God's guidance and Moses' help, they were able to cross the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea, and begin their 40-year journey through the desert in order to reach the Promised Land. And they sing in celebration, Micha Mocha, who is like you after they cross this Rubicon that they were facing. What we're turning to now is another type of threshold, and that is the threshold of twilight. On Shabbat, at this moment, day ends and night begins. And that can sometimes be anxiety-producing as we leave the world of light and enter the world of darkness. And what this prayer, Hashkivenu, encourages us to do is imagine the sukkah of peace, God's protective shelter over us at this time of moving from day to night, from light to darkness, from certainty to uncertainty. So I'd like to ask you to join me in English at the top of page 161, and then Gordon will sing the prayer on page 160. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Shalom, Shalom. V'hamidenu Shomreinu B'chayim. Ufros aleinu Sukat Shlomecha, Ufros aleinu Sukat Shlomecha. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. Hamidenu shomreinu l'chayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Shelter us beneath your wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right.
Please take a moment now for your own silent thoughts and prayers.
page 180. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer.
At this point in our service, we think of those in need of healing on this Shabbat, healing of body, healing of spirit, and healing of heart. And we ask God to bestow the bracha, the blessing of refuah shlema, full and complete healing to the following men and women from our community or those known and loved by our congregation: Ilana Massey, Kevin Brackett, Michelle Camissia, Joshua Hyman, Jesse Friedman, Marjorie Gilberg, Jim Mates, Brenda Flood, Sharon Blevis, Walter Wilmert, Jerry Mautner, Kirk Whitlatch, David Rabb, Jensen Beach, Aaron Ledden, Geraldine Kokich, David Mendelson, Rachel Sadek, Blake Battles, Michaela Cohen, Diane Rado Persile, Maeve Lu Huang, Janet Marbury, Bernita Ladrigan, and Ceci Gastello. And if anyone has a name either at home or here that you'd like to add to our list, I invite you to please do so. The Misha Berach is on page 511.
Misha Berach Avoteinu, Misha Berach V'imoteinu, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Uyivarech et hacholim. Mishe Berach Avoteinu, Mishe Berach V'imoteinu, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Uyivarech et hacholim.
We continue on page 586. Charles, you want to come up and help us? And if you're able, please rise.
Yeah, there Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, l'tei gedula liotzer breshit, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
Please be seated. It is my pleasure now to invite up board member Yves Kahn to share with you some important announcements.
We have a long list today. Oh, my God. We have a long list. I'll try to be fast. Shorashim will be jumping back in with music with Megan this Sunday, August 27th. Make sure to register and talk to Mara about the upcoming programs. Religious School will meet for the second week this Sunday. If you still need to register, it's open online, and you can contact Mara with questions. L'chaim, I hope you're all going to be there on Sunday. Don't miss your last chance for early bird tickets on sale at Eventbrite for the festivities at CIA Copia. September is fast approaching, which means high holidays are around the corner. Go online to find all the details and program registration forms. Sunday, September 2nd, join Art Grand for Torah study Saturday at 10:30 a.m. $10 Ladies Night Bunko will be September 6th at 7 p.m. in the foyer. Register online or contact Maxine Maluso. Shabbat Oneg on September 8th will be hosted in honor of Bonnie Feynman and Scott Brown's birthday. On Saturday, September 9th at 6 p.m., join in the Selikot Havdalah and healing service with receptions. If any members are looking to carpool for CBS events, contact the office and let us know so Bonnie Feynman can help coordinate rides. We'd like to give warm wishes to this week's birthdays and anniversaries. Happy birthday to Jeb Rubin, Lily Goldman, Michelle Murray, Jesse Patrick, Juliana DiPasqua, and Lisa Wenegard. And happy anniversary to Susan Copperman and Philip Ross, 19th anniversary, and Andrew Starr and Debbie Alterstar, 31st anniversary. That's it. Thank you.
That was fast.
We're supposed to have a short service.
Right. At this point, as we reach the end of our formal service, we think of those who are no longer with us, those who have died both recently and in seasons past. We honor the memories of those who have died during the past 12 months. Ed Eston, Micah Bisell, Colonel Ed West, Jill Daly Katz, Gabriel Harrison Escalera, Joe McCaffrey, Ruth Morlett, Lords Blake, Othello Thornton, Alan Rosen, Fred Goldman, Ann Rapson, Bob Massey, Lucille Posner, Bunny Goldstein, William Bill Lenish, Barbara Cosson, Minnie Shostak, Kevin McCarville, Etta Kessler, Faye Goldstein Glick, and Diana Coyne. We also honor the memories of those who have died at this season in past years, their yard sites, the anniversaries of their deaths. Ben Baumel, Nathan Schumer, Pauline Becker, Tevye Schwartz, and Shirley Gordon. And if anyone has a name they wish to add tonight, I invite you to please do so. The Mourner's Cottage is on page 598. Please rise. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, b'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'alam u'lamei maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei dekudsha barichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran ba'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shmaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. May the source of peace grant peace to all those in mourning and comfort to all those who are bereaved. And let us all say amen. Please be seated. So we're going to be doing our Kiddush and Motzi in anticipation of our delicious oneg waiting for us after our guest speaker. But right now, before I introduce Tama, I want to turn it over to Gordon, who's going to do our final song of the evening.
Sure, let's turn to 645. Down at the very bottom.
Lo yisak goy el goy cherev, lo yilmadu od milchama. Lo yisak goy el goy cherev, lo yilmadu od milchama. Lo yisak goy el goy cherev, lo yilmadu od milchama. Lo yisak goy el goy cherev, lo yilmadu od milchama. Lo yisak goy el goy cherev, lo yilmadu od milchama. Lo yisak goy el goy cherev, lo yilmadu od milchama. Lo yisak goy el goy cherev, lo yilmadu od milchama. Lo yisak goy el goy cherev, lo yilmadu od milchama. Lo yisak goy el goy cherev, lo yilmadu od milchama. Lo yisak goy el goy cherev, lo yilmadu od milchama.
Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos again to everyone. I mentioned at the outset of services the concept of tikkun olam, the idea of working to make the world a more perfect place, because we all know the world is very broken, and it has been for millennia. In Judaism, especially in Rabbinic Judaism, the concept of tikkun olam, the idea of working for justice, is not an option. If you are Jewish, if you are a member of the Jewish community, working to make the world a better place, working for justice is not an option, it is an obligation. It is part of your moral duty as a Jew, as a citizen of the world, to do the good work. And I can't think of too many other people who have committed so much of their lives to this kind of work than our speaker tonight, Tama Edelman. Now, Tama is a registered nurse. She is also someone, and so of course, during her career as a nurse, has worked hard to help better people. But in how many years have you been with Hands On Global now? With 8 years. So for the last 8 years, Tama has been a member of Hands On Global and has done very important work around the world with a major focus in recent years in Ukraine, having brought medical supplies to those in need, trying to assess how to help people who are in desperate straits to live safer and more secure lives. Tama is a member of CBS along with her sister Mara, and we are so fortunate to have her be able to talk about her work tonight with us. So Tama, I'd like to invite you to come up to the Bima. I think she's going to open here and then move over there to do a PowerPoint, but I'll let you start right here. So thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. It's a little different having a presentation on
Ukraine, democracy, and the impact of war. So I'm so grateful to the community here for inviting me to share the journey, the story, and what happened to the Jews of Ukraine. So with that, let me just go back to the PowerPoint over here, and we'll be showing it up here. So just, you don't have to turn your chair, just switch it, and you can see. Everybody switched? All right. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me here today. I know you all watch the news, read the articles, and I'm just one of many who volunteered to support Ukraine during this invasion. After being in Ukraine, I knew I had to speak up, step out, and be their voice, for they could not be. I am here to talk about the war on democracy, lives, and its impact. But first, let me begin with who we are. Hands On Global is the NGO that I work with. We travel the world doing second responder. First responders are the emergency, and we're the second responders, which do then for all the follow-up care and being couriers for the medical equipment. But let me just tell you a little bit about the geography of Ukraine. To understand this war, you have to understand a little of the geography. It's slightly smaller than Texas. Russia borders on 33% of the Ukraine. West to east is about 745 miles, which is San Francisco to Salt Lake. And Kyiv to the border with Russia is San Francisco to San Luis Obispo. So you can see how close this war is for these people. But I also want to tell you about the Jewish community of Ukraine. My relatives, many of them were from Ukraine, and I'm sure many of yours were. They started with 3 million in Jewish population. Then, of course, I'm sure everybody knows about Baba Yar. And of the 6 million that were murdered, 1.5 were from the Ukraine. Today, only about 43,000 remain at best count. So what are some of the famous things Ukraine's known for? Hasidism, klezmer music, and of course, all of us, Fiddler on the Roof. Because we would not know and understand shtetl life if we didn't have Fiddler on the Roof. President Zelensky, elected in 2019 at the age of 45. He's been outspoken about his Jewish identity. Members of his family were murdered in the Holocaust, and others fought in the Red Army. He defines himself as a post-Soviet Jew, one not based on religion, but more on culture and history. Between May and August of 2019, Ukraine was the only other country other than Israel to have both a prime minister and president who were Jewish. Oopsie. So I'm sure everyone knows every single one of these people up here. And they're all born in Ukraine. We kept hearing they're a fragile democracy. Russia feels the Ukraine is theirs. And for 2 centuries, the Ukrainians endured violence, poverty, and the tyranny of Tsarist Russia. After brief independence in 1918, they had soul-crushing communist dictatorship. Then there was the Stalin man-made famine of Holodomor, which he did in order to bring Ukrainians to their knees. It was intentional. Then Nazi occupation, as well as occupation by Poland, Austria, and Hungary. In 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine chose to form a democracy, despite poverty and unseemly obstacles. So what freedoms would they lose if they go back to Russian control? Loss of democracy, their economy, their free market. And in short, they lose their identity and what defines them as Ukrainians. Imagine if that happened to us here. How would we feel in the US? We would no longer be Americans, and we wouldn't even have a country. And I'm not just talking about destruction of homes, buildings, infrastructure, but loss of lives. Their economy has been decimated. It's going to cost $349 billion to rebuild, and that's climbing. And you have to think, would any of us want to give up our democracy and live under autocratic rule? Or is this where we stand and fight for our country? War devastates everything. It cripples the human soul, destroys buildings, destroys nature, and with nuclear arsenals on the table, there's even a higher planetary impact. Democracy is often a distraction. War is not. Our medical journey revealed that the impact on everyday lives and what the potential loss of democracy will ultimately mean. I share this journey with you to put a face on the Ukraine and on war itself. Since the war started, and in fact they call it the invasion, not the war started when they took Crimea. This is the full-scale invasion. We've sent 2 medical teams. We sent an assessment team to an orphanage for completely disabled children. We sent our first courier team, and our second courier team leaves this September 15th. We carried 24 50-pound bags. We were all over 70, and carrying and begging and groveling for the airlines, for transportation, for anybody, so the cost of shipping this stuff wouldn't be so outrageous. This trip here, the baggage fees from the US to Budapest were $2,000 US. And that didn't even get us into the country. We met with Ukrainian trauma surgeons in our first trip in 2022, and they told us what they wanted. They gave us the list, they told us what they needed, they were very clear on what was happening. And their greatest need were these things called external fixators, which are limb-saving equipment. Very expensive and require physicians who are specifically trained. Initially, the company donated this equipment and shipped it via cargo to the Ukraine, and it never got there. Got stopped in customs, who knows along the path what happened. So they said they would no longer send it unless they had couriers. So Hands on Global volunteers became the couriers for this equipment. We arrived in Mukashavo in the West Ukraine with all of our bags, and they were going to 4 different trauma locations. When we showed them the bag of 100 military-grade tourniquets, they said they needed thousands more. And that gave us our first indication of the impact of amputations of this war. We met with Dr. Yuri Demyan that evening. He's a pediatric trauma surgeon, orthopedist, who also works in the hospitals. He lives in the Ukraine, and he works with children, civilians, and soldiers. He told us that the government hospitals, the civilian hospitals, the clinics, everything is booked up. They are filled and overflowing. And they have as many 100 patients arrive each week via train. He described the Ukrainian military as twofold. One, professional civilians, and two, 90% of who's fighting now are those young men and women between the ages of 18 and 60 who are civilians, who are not trained soldiers. And so as a result, the majority of the war wounded they're seeing are these young people. Can this limb be saved? Can it be functional? The patient may have a septic blood infection. The surgeries begin, long hours, back to back. The equipment we brought is used up very quickly. A visit to 2 orthopedic wards, one for people with infections and one for non-infections, coming from the front lines. It's intimate and it's close, which is great for camaraderie. It is not good for infections, and it's not good for rest for these wounded soldiers. And war wounds, you know, they're devastating. The wounds that are coming out of this war are different than wounds we see in previous wars, whether it be Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. They're different kinds of wounds. Due to the massive number of amputations, Hands On Global decided to focus on prosthetics. So we visited this place 45 minutes outside of Mukashavo to take a look at what was happening. Here we have at Protez, we met with a young man whose brother is in the US and also has Protez USA, and they're developing prosthetics. In the Ukraine, they develop very simple prosthetics, and ones that are much more complicated, or people who need multiple prosthetics, they send them to the US. Protez USA brings 12 soldiers at a time who require the more complex and multiple prosthetics. They're sponsored through donations. The amputees fly to the US. There they get their prosthetics, stay with a Minnesota family, and all expenses are paid. And then they go back to the Ukraine for some rehab. The soldier in the middle is 26 years old and was injured 10 months ago. The other soldier is 35. He was in special forces and couldn't tell us where he was. He lost his leg in eastern Ukraine. He said, "I'm going back to the front." And of course, we were just sort of stunned. You don't have to. And his comment to us, without any doubt in his voice, was, "It's my country, it's my nation, and I can." We're now collaborating with Protez to help do fundraising for their prosthetics. They've provided 76 soldiers with multiple prosthetics. The children. There were 3 children. Our director went there. We wanted to do our due diligence before we recommended to people. we wanted to go there and confirm. And they were in Minnesota, and she was nearby. The 3 children you can see on the right were playing in a soccer field. All the friends were killed except for them. The 7-year-old lost his arm at his shoulder, but he'll do fine. The 15-year-old lost both legs above the knee. He stayed in the corner by himself and was very depressed. The 16-year-old had one leg gone at the hip, paralyzed on one side, and due to a head injury, and this child had one functioning arm, and he was there working as hard as he could. The drive between Kyiv and Zhytomyr, there are sandbags everywhere, concrete roadblocks, Ukrainian tanks. It was evident this country was under attack. Here I am, a witness to this trauma surgeon's perspective and the impact of the continuous war. After a year, will people in my country still want to give to Ukraine as this war goes on? What are we in the U.S. willing to give to preserve democracy in the Ukraine? And what am I willing to give? How far am I willing to step outside of my comfort zone to do things other than being the eyes and ears for friends who are not able to witness? Once we delivered the medical supplies, we didn't have a defined role. Repeatedly, we had to tell ourselves we're witnessing, we're present, we are there to tell the people we support them in solidarity. 2 old white women came to talk and learn about what was happening in the Ukraine. And yet, I knew there was more. I confess I'm a dog lover. We read an article about the animal hospital in Lviv, Western Ukraine, which has volunteers helping them. So, of course, we decided we would help them. And the dogs were many left from when 12 million people left the country. They couldn't take their animals. And IDPs, which are the internally displaced people who did not leave the country, they also couldn't take care of their animals. So Lviv, as one city, was overrun with these animals. And so we went to do our little bit of what we could. As I walked the streets in Lviv, I knew there was a war going on in the east, yet I didn't see it. People went about their business, eating, going shopping, doing all the things. We even saw some Hare Krishna people in Lviv, and everybody was there. But we didn't feel the war, and it almost felt a bit schizophrenic. But per Dr. Yuri and our taxi driver, people not on the front lines, their role, they have a job, and it's not to be afraid. It's to do everything they can to normalize their life. They know everyone can't be at the front, but they need to help and be ready for when these soldiers come home. And that includes mourning for those who gave their last measure. One day we were walking through the streets, and all of a sudden we heard taps. There's only one reason for taps. We didn't know if we should stop, walk. We didn't know what the rules were. And then we came upon this public mourning, and they had them, once we knew what they were, we saw them throughout the city. And people stopped until the procession passed and taps stopped. And then people went up to these memorial boards. A public way of mourning. We did not start looking out for this place. Had we known we were going to be impacted the way we were, we might have shied away. As a nurse who served in Vietnam, I've curated my life to minimize any memories or exposure of war. This journey to the cemetery evoked painful memories. I had a mixture of numbness and nausea, more than wet eyes, and parts shut down, not able to take it all in. I walked carefully between the rows, stopping to read figures and ages, look at their pictures, and feeling the pain and rawness that the area presents. Some graves were very fresh, people sitting around them, brushing the dirt, bringing bags of new dirt, adding water, taking out flowers, or simply just sitting there with their hands to their eyes, holding one another. My presence felt intrusive. In moments they required the ultimate privacy. But so many, so close together, it was difficult to give that privacy for these mourners. When I came across the grave of a 19-year-old, my tears gave way. Everything about it seemed so wrong. Many died alone, in pain, scared, and so far from home. The rawness was in the air. I walked away shaking and weeping. This is always the effect of war, and it's just too real here. They're paying a big price to be independent. In part, they're also paying a price for the rest of the EU. If this does not stop here in Ukraine, then we're looking at Poland, we're looking at Hungary, and we're looking at several other countries. So I want to thank you for coming, for being a witness to a war. It's not easy, whether in the trench or sitting here tonight. If any of you have any questions or I'd be happy to answer them either here or in the ONIC.
We have time for a few questions right now. We need the mic, so if anyone has a question, I'll come by and give it to you.
What other countries are doing the things you're doing?
Countries? Everyone. When we went there, the first time we went there, less than a month after the war started, we went in through Bucharest in Romania. That was the only way for us to get in. At that point, it was inundated with NGOs. Our food guy, who's the food guy? World Kitchen, he was there. Everybody was there. All the countries, all the shipping materials labeled with what countries they were coming in. There was a big response then. But people are getting tired. People are getting tired. Countries are getting tired. And so, and this isn't over.
Other questions? Rivka, hold on. You need the mic. There are people at home. They won't be able to hear you.
The language, is Russian the official language? Ukrainian is the official? I'm just curious. What is the language in Ukraine?
Because the Russians would not allow Ukrainian to be taught in the schools. Our driver talked to us about his going to school, and he was a rural Ukrainian, so they spoke Ukrainian. But when he got to Kyiv, it was only Russian. They were not allowed to speak Ukrainian. And of course that changed when they decided to not be aligned with Russia. And now they're teaching Ukrainian in the schools. But a lot of the signs are in Russian. There's a lot of mixing. This is not an easy easy separation, clear separation.
Okay, we can take a couple more questions. So Ellen, and then did I see your hand over there?
Thank you, Tama, for always being on the front lines. But I think it's important for people to know what it costs for one prosthesis for one person for one limb. I think we have no idea of the magnitude of the cost and what we as a community could come to do to even help one person.
Right. The prosthetics, the simple ones, are around 15,000 US. The complex ones are more like 50,000 US. So initially, when we went there, we said, oh, God, we'll go try and raise. Well, it's one thing to try and raise the money from a community for 15,000 and say somebody will get a leg or above the knee or an arm. But it's another when you say 50,000. You know, our communities, those of us who do this work, we're from small little communities, Helena, Montana, Boise, Idaho. You know, we're little people. We're not the big guns. And so they have so many amputations. It's just heartbreaking. And it's hard to know what to do. In the current article we just got in, I think, the Press Democrat, talked about the ones who are blind and how many blind people we are now seeing in this war. We cannot be complacent. That luxury. As Rabbi Niles said, it is incumbent upon us to get out of our comfort zone, to push ourselves, and do something more for the world. Thank you.
I think we have one final question.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. How are the 43,000 Jews that remain in Ukraine? How are they doing?
I'll be back there in September 15th. I'll let you know. The temples have been decimated. So you really don't see, and we were in Lviv, and we were in Mukashavo, and my sister was in Kiev, which had big Jewish Kiev had big Jewish populations, and you don't see much of anything.
Tama, thank you so much for coming here tonight, and thank you for everything that you've done to help those in Ukraine. Wait, I want you to come back up here for a second. Thank you for illuminating us, for enlightening us, and most of all, for inspiring us. And if it's okay with you, during the Oneg in a second, if people have further questions about what they can do, how they can help, can they talk to you?
Yes, please.
Okay, great.
Anytime you want someone, you want someone who wants to talk about the Ukraine, that is on my mind now, 24/7. So
Thank
yes,
you.
of course.
So let's do, Gordon, could you come back up? Let's do the Oneg and Kiddush together. And could everyone please rise? Tama, would you hold this up?
Okay. You have to tell me what to do.
You can just hold it up in the air and we'll do the blessing. Yeah.
Ready?
I know.
Baruch atah Adonai,
Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Amen. L'chaim. You can have a sip.
Baruch atah
Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. B'tei avon. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
It looks like a shuttle plate.
I know.